You cannot meet anyone in the house. Let that sink in. So today I kind of want to talk about why I chose to study engineering in Europe for my master's degree in particular, and why more students from the US should consider studying abroad. Ciao, y'all, NaturallyKenya here, and welcome back to my channel. In this video, I wanted to discuss why more students in general, but particularly from the US, like me, should consider studying abroad, because it really does open a lot of horizons that maybe you didn't know about. So I wanted to kind of dive in, discuss the positives, the negatives, the challenges you have to overcome, and just paint a picture of why I actually think that it's really important for more students from the US to consider studying abroad. So if you are new here, my name is Kenya, yes, like the country, and I'm an American girl documenting my life and experiences abroad living in Rome, Italy. If you're new here, make sure to like this video, subscribe to my channel, and hit that notification bell so you get notified every time I upload. But everything on my channel is about life abroad, tips, tricks to make your stay easier, smoother, what life is like in Rome. There's a lot of them. I can't even speak today. There's a lot of content on my channel. Honestly, we're not off to a good start here. But there's a lot of content on my channel that you may find interesting. So make sure to tune in. And I have new uploads for you guys on Sundays and Thursdays, sometimes Thursdays. And without further ado, let's get into the video. So first, let me give you a bit of background, okay? So I actually did my bachelor's degree. I did my bachelor's degree in engineering in the US and decided that I really wanted to go live in Italy at some point in my life. But this is kind of a long story, because when I was like 9 years old, I heard this beautiful language on TV, turned out to be Italian. And after that point, I realized that, hey, you know what? It would be nice to live in Italy at some point, right? But I knew that I wanted to get my bachelor's in the US just to have the baseline for my studies already in place for if I went back to the US, right? Or, you know, if I ever want to work and live in the US, having those credentials. So I decided at the end of the day, let me just research programs to see what there is available in Italy. So I was between Milan and Rome, and I received acceptances to both programs, but the program in Milan was actually still a portion of it was in Italian, and I knew at that stage of my life there was going to be no way that I could learn Italian before actually moving there, before the actual start of the new school year. And so I settled on Rome. And so I've been in Rome we're coming up on 7 years now. That I decided to study abroad, live here, and here we are almost 7 years later. So life is funny. Be careful, parents. If you send your kids abroad, they may not come back. Just disclaimer. So that's how I got my start here. I decided to study engineering in Rome. And I think that paints the full picture of the background. Oh, wait, I'm forgetting one thing. I actually decided to study abroad in Stockholm, in Sweden, for 6 months prior to coming to Rome. That was like one of my last semesters of my bachelor's degree, and that was just to understand if I actually wanted to pursue this particular field of engineering in depth. And so when I went to Sweden, I was studying master's degree level courses that applied to my bachelor's degree in the States. And I decided, oh my gosh, this is really nice. Like, this is something I really want to do. And that's why I decided to apply to those programs in Italy, full circle moment, and then bring it back to Italy. So that's why I ended up in Rome. I almost I almost left that out. So I wanted to get into some of the benefits of studying abroad that I've identified. I think it goes much further than just studying, okay? Because yes, there's a side that's academic, of course, but there's also like a lot of personal development that happens when you do decide to step outside the box and come abroad. One of the best advantages is being able to actually experience new cultures. You're going to be completely outside of your usual comfort zone. So you're going to have to develop those skills to adapt in certain circumstances. You're going to be immersing yourself in a new culture, a new language, and you're going to have to kind of mold yourself to fit in those places. And I think that's really important, especially like if you are studying as like a young adult, because it really will go hand in hand with how your professional experiences are in the future. Every time you walk into a certain environment or a certain professional setting, or really a social setting as well, sometimes you do have to not change who you are at the core, but kind of morph maybe your discussions or what you decide to put forth as a part of who you are with different people. So I think it's really important that you kind of are able to gain that skill of like adapting yourself and kind of morphing, not at your core, you're still you, but morphing to different situations and different cultures of different people. Another one I'd say is that you really genuinely gain this global perspective. Now, I'm going to be biased here because I am from the States and say that everything is not always about us, guys. Like, I'm just going to be honest, like, being from the US, I love being from the US, but also there's so many other cultures, countries that are important in this world. And it's not always like USA, USA. Like there's some people over here that have there's some countries here that also have a lot of influence. I don't want to say power, but they definitely have a play in the global economy and how things progress forward, right? So I think it's really important that for at least the American students to see, it's not always about us. There's so many other players in this world, and I think that's something that you really genuinely see when you get out of the States. And of course, the language, okay? So wherever you decide to study abroad, I think it's really important that you take advantage of that time period that you're there, because you'll probably never have another moment in your life, unless you stay like in that place longer, where you're fully immersed in the language and in the culture. But here, I mean the language, because the language is super important. I feel like you have the extra advantage that your everyday life, advertisements on YouTube, who knows, people around you speaking in the streets, how to order coffee, like, things like this, like daily interactions. You have that advantage and edge to be able to do that in person, real time, and not necessarily studying by book or with the tutor in another country. You should really take advantage of that, because I think it's something so rare. And even when I was in Sweden, I took like an entry level to Swedish language and culture class. And that language was hard because Swedish has so many extra vowels, but it was one of the most, I think, rewarding experiences that there was. I've never thought that I'd be sitting in class trying to learn Swedish. Like, how random is that? But I definitely think it kind of helped me understand like how difficult it is to try to integrate into a new society. And of course, a portion of that is the language. So I would encourage you that if you do get the opportunity to go abroad, make sure that you really, not just in a studying context, but also living in general, make sure that you really take advantage of those days or months that you have in the country, because it's time you will never get back. Another topic I wanted to touch on is the opportunity to network. So a good thing about being in these global environments is that there's people from all over the world, right? And there should be people from all over the world in your class as well. So I think it gives you a wonderful opportunity to be able to connect with different people, understand what's important to them, maybe even food, cultural acts, how or what they deem important and valuable for their culture. And I think that's really fun, because you start to be able to like compare and contrast what you value in your society versus theirs. And I think it's really fun that you create a new sense of community, a new network. And it's just amazing. I think that's one of the real advantages to deciding to study abroad or live abroad as well. I also want to mention like the travel opportunities that you have, right? If you're studying in Europe, for example, and you're in some European city as a base, it's so much easier to explore other European countries by keeping like one home base. So it's never like you're traveling with all of your things, you're coming back home, right? So I think it's always nice to be able to get out, and if you can, explore other countries, cultures that you probably wouldn't be able to have the time or vacation days from the US to explore. So I think that's one of the major advantages as well, that you'll never have that time element, that time component to actually get out there and explore another country that may be literally down the street. I say down the street, but it could be like 1 hour away from you while you're based in a certain city. So I did, in this kind of intermission, want to address like my experience of what it was like before going into the challenges. of studying abroad, and just kind of paint the picture of my own personal experience studying engineering in Rome. So like I said, my choice was between Rome and Milan, but because the program in Milan was still a portion of it, I guess, was in Italian, I just chose I decided to choose Rome. And in terms of the coursework, I found it to be very theoretical, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I did find it to not be as applicable for real life operations, or like what you would actually be doing from day one on engineering projects, like in the real world. So obviously the theory behind everything kind of sets the stage for the practical, right? Or the practical application in the real world. But I felt it to be very theoretical, a little too heavy on the theoretical side for the operations, but it all depends on what you value, right? So every country system has a different approach. And I remember thinking that this was one of the elements that really was probably the most challenging for me coming from the US system, because I felt like, I don't want to say it's not as useful in the real world, because it is, but it wasn't as straightforward as the things we would actually use, like starting as an engineer day one. In terms of the professors, I would definitely say they were super qualified. For sure, they had backgrounds and really, really complex CVs, work experience, projects they've worked on, for sure. Like, they were super qualified, hands down. But I have a but. At times, introduce the language component. I do think that was an issue for some of the professors. But again, in the engineering world, like, the language is not as important as if you are studying law, for example. Like, that is a very complex subject linguistically versus engineering. So I definitely think there was room for improvement there. But it was, I believe, the second edition of this program in English. So I think everyone was adapting and learning. But it just, coming from the States, I expected that to be at a little bit of a higher level. But then again, here I am, the girl that decided not to study in Italian, or a portion of the program in Italian. So who am I to talk, right? And then in terms of the exams, they were a completely different format, and they were definitely challenging because it's like being put on display. Okay, now let me explain. When you have an exam in engineering, and I'm pretty sure a lot of subjects, I don't know if it's just in engineering, but in Italy, it is literally an oral exam in front of everybody in the class, okay? The professor is asking you a question, and you have to respond after studying 800 PowerPoint slides for the subject and reading publications and textbooks and blah, blah, blah. And you're on the spot and you have to respond, and everyone's around and it's just quiet. It's just you. And so the anxiety is at an all-time high, right? And you also receive your grade in front of everyone, right? So very stressful, very stressful versus some of our exams in the States where it would be a final project, or it would be some like a written exam or something. Yeah, this was totally different. That was a shock to me. And it was very stressful, but I survived and I did pretty well. So I'm not mad about it. So let's go into the challenges, because after touching on the advantages, my own experiences, I think it's worthwhile to dive into some of the challenges in this video as well, because I honestly feel like you challenge yourself and set like a new pathway for yourself you didn't already have before. But there are some items you should consider when you're thinking about studying abroad. And number one, in my opinion, literally number one, has to be the fact that you have to think about accreditation if it's a subject that you may need to get a license for in the US. Now, let me explain. Like, a lot of the subjects like engineering, law, medicine, computer science, and some other scientific fields, they have like a recognized board, right? And this board is based in the US. Okay, I'm thinking like if you are trying to be a lawyer in the US, for example, or an engineer in the US, you have certain boards that have to qualify your degree and list it as if it is accredited or not, right? The accreditation program, or however it's called. Every system has a different one. And so I always encourage people that, depending on your subject, You may want to get that bachelor's degree at least in the US if you're ever thinking about living your life there, like at any point in life. I mean, you never know what can happen, right? So I always say like it's probably best that you just make that investment and get your bachelor's degree like I did in the US. So you have that program already accredited, already like set in stone, your studies are secured. Because if you are to do a master's degree or another degree abroad and the US does not recognize that program, sometimes they won't accept it at all, or sometimes they'll consider it, but you have to submit all the syllabi, all the PowerPoint presentations, translate everything, and then they have to do a review. And if you want to become like a professional engineer or maybe a professional architect, something like that, take the bar exam, for example, it probably does not translate. So in that case, I encourage for some fields that you really think about staying in the US just in case, because it doesn't translate. Another challenge is the finances, right? Now, I want to really encourage all of you to really go out there and try to find some kind of funding opportunity, some kind of study abroad scholarship. You may be surprised what you find when you actually look for it. Just try to stay encouraged. I know it's hard to look for, scholarships and feel discouraged, like, oh, I don't have this experience, or maybe they're looking for this in another field. But let me just say that I believe, I don't know if I said this in another video, but a large percentage of my study abroad experience in Stockholm, I don't remember what percentage it is, but it was largely funded by scholarships because I had the opportunity to go abroad that many students didn't even want to try to go abroad. So there was this fund or these funds that were available. And because there weren't as many students that decided to study abroad, I was actually able to gather more from that, I guess, pool of funding to make my study abroad dreams come true. So that's one of those cases where I never thought that was a possibility. I would think that that was completely out of reach, but because other students weren't utilizing those funds, they made them more available for me. So I'm forever grateful. I mean, now I think more people are studying abroad. I mean, with social media and everyone kind of encouraging people to get out there and travel more, obviously post-pandemic, LOL. Basically, I think it may be a bit more challenging, but I'm not so sure. I'm just saying that make sure you go out there and don't feel discouraged. You just never know what's out there until you look. Another challenge is the adjustment, right? It can be difficult to adjust to a new language. It can be difficult to adjust to a new culture, new surroundings, and that's probably the biggest one. Really, I would say language more than anything, because you can move in a space and, be quiet and not say anything probably. But eventually you're going to need to talk, right? And communicate and express yourself. And I think that's one of the major challenges. In addition, depending on the country you decide to go to, the bureaucracy, getting the visa, the paperwork done, all the documentation, it can be a real challenge. Just speaking on behalf of Italy, it was a mess. Honestly, I have nothing else to say. It was an absolute, complete mess, disaster. But what can you do? If you want this dream, you go for it. Also, the homesickness, right? So you'll probably be missing your family, missing your friends. And a lot of people kind of use that to make their experience in a new place negative, but I really encourage you not to let that take over your whole perspective when you live abroad. It's normal to feel homesick. It's normal to be like, oh my God, this is too much for me at times. Like, it's so different, but just know you're not the only one experiencing that, okay? And then of course, in certain situations, you have a challenge of learning how to get around the city, public transportation, taking your car, parking. A lot of it has to do with your mobility in the city, right? Because every time you move, it can just change things, right? Like, can you take the train? Can you take the metro? And it's a learning experience, a challenge, but this is probably one of the easier challenges on the list just because we have Google Maps and all these apps and software. And then another challenge would be, of course, finding your community, because being in a new place means you have to make new friends. You have to kind of get out of the box, step outside of yourself, go into uncomfortable situations that maybe you weren't expecting. I don't know. I really know it is a challenge to step out of your comfort zone. Like, you really have to get out there to make friends. Like my mom says, you cannot meet anyone in the house. Let that sink in. So I'm just saying that you do have to get out there, go to happy hours, reach out to classmates, try to start discussions with them, find out what's important to them culturally, ask about their family, where they come from. Like, just get out there. I know it's hard when you may have like a more of a shy personality, but you literally lose nothing by just trying to connect with someone, you know, and other people will find it, or maybe you will find it difficult to connect with some people, but I'm pretty sure someone will appreciate your personality and, you know, want to connect with you. And also they may be looking for a friend in a new place too. So I'm just saying that get out there, try to discover something new about yourself, and you just never know the connections you will build. A challenge, yes, but probably one of the most important, and that is to step outside the box and see if you can make new connections. So guys, that's all for this video. And in conclusion, I just want to say you can do it too. I moved to Italy almost 7 years ago at this point, and I never came back. So that being said, parents, be careful. You may send your kids abroad and they may never come back in the good way though, because they're living their life. Okay. But also I just think it's really rewarding that people step out of their box at least for 1 month in their life. Like, if you can do it, I really encourage you to live, not even just studying abroad, but just living abroad for at least 1 month in a new place. So you can kind of get out and see how other people live. Like, it's not just about your life and your comfort zone. I think people really have to take advantage of seeing new experiences, seeing new cultures, seeing new food, what people consider important for their culture, their societal norms. It's just interesting. I just find it to be one of the most rewarding parts of being on this planet in this life. So yeah, that's all for this video, guys. So if you haven't already, like this video, subscribe to my channel, hit the notification bell so you get notified every time I upload. And I will see you guys in the next one. Ciao, y'all.